So, Brad, this week is San Diego Comic-Con, and I'm at Costco, stocking up with, got to get some waters, got to get some this and that in terms of paperwork or little knickknacks that you might need to complete a sale, whatever it is.
Yep.
And I have been eating relatively healthy in the last few weeks. I'm down 20 pounds, trying to get it old trim Dave Kellett going for Comic-Con. Anyway, I round the corner and see, I can only imagine it's a 400 pack of Nabisco snacky treats. The variety pack.
Yeah, I love a good variety pack.
I will admit, Brad, I'm not made of stone. The Nabisco variety pack for Comic-Con looked pretty good. A 400 pack of Oreos and cheese-based things and all sorts of treats. The Nutter Butters, the Ritz Bits, the Chips Ahoy, the Nilla Wafers. And I'm gonna be honest, Brad, I am not gonna be eating great this weekend for San Diego Comic-Con.
Well, listen, you're not stretching the truth at all when you say you're not made of stone. I've felt that midsection. It's much more like marshmallow.
No, I gotta tell you, that was uncalled for, Brad Guigar. Uncalled for.
You're the one who opened it up by saying not made of stone. You can't leave an opening line like that and expect me to just let it drift over the plate.
It's not great when my wife takes a single index finger and goes tee-hee on my stomach. That doesn't help. So anyway, San Diego Comic-Con for me is, hey, I'm going to need a lot of coffee and continuously, and I'm going to need a lot of sugar and continuously if I'm going to make it through this 16-hour day for 5 days,
Listen, I don't think there's anybody. I think we're all trying to eat better, trying to be more healthy. But when something comes up like a family vacation or Comic-Con, where you're so far outside of your normal routine, you can't expect great things from yourself. You just got to know that week is going to be a loss, and you're going to come back and get back on the horse and go when you get back. You can't expect yourself more than that.
You know how in sports they have the bye week? This is kind of your bye week. You're like, I'll just be over here in my Comic-Con booth eating this 400 pack of Nabisco variety treats. Hi, everybody.
Athletes have a bye week. Cartoonists have a week, where you just look at it and you go, Buh.
So anyway, if you're at San Diego Comic-Con, come by booth 1228. I'm on the 1200 row, and you'll see me eating a variety of Nabisco products. Dave Kellett, big fan of processed sugar. Come by and say hi.
And a pretty good variety, too. I mean, you listed off all the greats over there from the fine folks at Nabisco.
Well, Brad, Costco does a good job of saying, hey, how do you feel about type 2 diabetes? Would you like some? We can make that happen for you. For the low price of $20, you too can have type 2 diabetes.
They just put it right up in the aisle. Aisle 1, aisle type 2, aisle 3.
That got me. Well, on that note, I'm going to say hello, everybody, and welcome to ComicLab, the show about making comics.
And making a living from comics. I'm Brad Guigar, editor of Webcomics.com and cartoonist of Evil Inc.
And I'm his friend Dave Kellett, who this week is at the big show at San Diego Comic-Con at booth 1228. Come say hi.
How many times are you going to mention 1228?
I am going to. You know what, Brad?
Holy cats.
You can go for a long walk off a short pier. I'm going to say it one more time before this show is over.
No, you're not. No, you're not. I'm going to interrupt you if I hear 1228 one more time.
Listen, I got to get 1228 one more time in the show, and it's going to happen towards the end, and that's it.
I guarantee it's not. Now say your thing.
I did say it, and you're supposed to say it. And this week's hour of comics advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/ComicLab. And Brad, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. Hey, listen. We've got some really good $5 questions over here from our Patreon backers, and I think we should jump right into them. What do you think?
I think not only do we have good questions, we have like a barn load of questions. Like I was looking down at the list. We've got a lot of catching up to do, Brad.
We are going to have to do a lightning round pretty soon.
I think we're going to have to do a lightning round show because we can only do like 5 or 6 questions a show, and we've got like 20 in the queue, and that's we're not going to catch up, Brad. All right, so let me throw the first question out at you, Brad Guigar. This comes from our friend Jay Lark, and Jay asks, Brad and Dave, 5, any tips for increasing genuine engagement from my readers on social media? So far, a lot of what I get, especially on Instagram, appears to be from bots or accounts asking for a like, etc. Brad Geiger, what do you think? How does someone increase their genuine engagement from their readers on social media?
Well, so there's a lot of things to unpack there, and I've got to say it, even though I'm sure I'm sure our listeners are getting tired of hearing me say it. The number one tip is create a great comic and do something that's engageable. If you want to know how to succeed on social media, the first step is do great work. And if you're not getting engagement, my first thought is I need to improve the quality of my comic, because if it was finding its audience, if it was hitting its audience, it would be getting engagement. And so I always have to say your first step is to redouble your efforts at getting better at your, not only your writing, because that's a mechanical thing. That's something that is, frankly, the more you do it, the better you're going to do it. But if you're working in humor, particularly humor, you've got to realize that you're working in the toughest kind of writing there is, period. And you've got to be much more ruthless about editing, rewriting, pushing yourself, not letting yourself off the hook. You've got to first improve what you're posting on social media. That's my first thought. What do you think about that?
So I think, yes, as an entry point to the conversation, that is the great way to start it, is that nothing
Yes.
else matters if the comic is not your A game, if you're not doing your best. And so
Right.
I think that's smart. I will follow that up by saying one thing that I do specifically on Instagram, because it's so easy to do, is that if someone is giving me a bot response or a bot like, or is a human being and saying, hey, love your work, love your, quote, generic work,
Yes.
maybe check out my stuff or maybe give my stuff a like, I immediately block both those bots and people asking for likes for likes.
Mm-hmm.
And your thought might be like, well, hold on now. It's a little cold to ban or block the artist asking for a look. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's not what this is for.
Right.
That's not the way you behave online. If they sincerely wanted me to check something out, they would send me an email or message me or get to know me somehow. A message underneath my comic saying, hey, I like your, I don't even mention the title, work.
Yes.
Come check out my work. Like it feels like one step up from a bot. And I have no compunction against just blocking those people outright, because they're not bringing anything to the table as far as an environment, and I don't want to encourage that or allow that to continue to exist.
Yeah.
So I block those right out. And then as far as what you can do to engage genuinely is that and this is something that I've learned from Chris Straub on his Chainsaw Suit comments, and it's something I've learned from Chris Halbach on his Instagram comments, which is if someone does engage you genuinely, you engage them back in your comments,
Yeah.
a human to a human. So don't let your comment feed under an Instagram comic go unchecked. Like check it once or twice for that first hour that the comic goes up, and chime in anytime you see something human and engaging and delightful and real. And then you'll find over time that you're teaching your audience to, oh, there's someone behind Brad's comics, and it's Brad. Oh, so if I
Right.
comment to Brad, Brad will comment back to me. How lovely. And then what's lovely about that is that the algorithm picks up on the fact that you are genuinely engaging and that you are not a bot posting Brad's comics.
Mm-hmm.
And that itself helps your work. Brad?
Yes. No, I co-sign that. Also, I'm going to put my word in once again for the 3 C's of social media, because I really do think that's an engagement builder. Remember to be posting content along with your commercial, that stuff that says, hey, I've got a Kickstarter, I've got a Patreon, along with curation. That's where you say, here's this other person's work that I like because of XYZ. You're giving people all kinds of reasons to engage with you that aren't necessarily, here's my comic or here's a commercial. I've said it time and time again. We web cartoonists are horrible about curation because we think everything's got to be about our original content. And social media is just that. It's social. So it's not just, think about if you were at a dinner party and all you did was talk about yourself. you would be very quickly categorized as a boorish guest at that dinner party and probably not invited back. Social media is no different. Every now and again, you got to talk about somebody else. Every now and again, it's not about you. It's about someone else. And I really do think curation is a very good way of increasing engagement. And finally, know your social media community and know what the norms are to that community. In other words, on Facebook, Facebook itself tends to throttle hashtags. That's why you very seldom see hashtags on Facebook posts, because everybody's kind of gotten the hint at this point. Facebook posts with hashtags get throttled, okay? Twitter, on the other hand, seems to be a little bit more accepting of it. More importantly, Twitter users seem to be more accepting of it until you put a big bank of hashtags there. And then users tend to back away from that. But one or two hashtags, especially if you split it off from the main body of the tweet, that's pretty acceptable. And then you get to Instagram, where hashtags are very important because there's no other way for people to discover your work other than through the hashtags. So then you want to use a lot of hashtags, but you want to be very smart about how you use the hashtags.
Well, actually, Brad, can I jump in here as a friend?
Yeah.
Because our next question actually feeds right off of this. So why don't we work this in? And then we can talk about both of these together.
Yeah.
So this comes in from Tyler Mann. It says, Brad and Dave, when using Instagram or Twitter, I never know what hashtags to use. Which, if any, do you use on a regular basis? And how did you decide to use them? For example, comic versus comics, singular or plural, et cetera, et cetera. This is a great question because it absolutely ties into what you just started to say there, Brad. So go ahead, keep going on your thought, but maybe work that in if you would.
Yeah. So here's my thoughts on that. Number one, the more I've done, I've gotten into Instagram, and I've got to also credit Scott Kurtz has gotten very interested in Instagram over the past couple months. So he's been getting in touch with me and asking questions and everything. And I've been telling him the little bit that I know, and I've been pointing him to other people that he can reach out to that can give him some more information, like Chris Halbeck. And so he's really gotten interested and has been doing some deep dives and been doing some research of his own. And he came back with some research that I didn't have. And he's been following tutorials from a lot of people who are talking about how to build a following specifically on Instagram. And he came up with a few things that I want to share with you guys here. And that is, number one, and by the way, it's something that I've done throughout the last couple of years, and I'm going to have to spend a lot of time undoing it. But if you have a bank of hashtags that you use repeatedly, in other words, if you just copy and paste hashtags, like I've done for this podcast on iTunes, like I've done for my comics on Instagram, like I've done in a lot of different ways, when you use the same set of hashtags, you may get identified as a spammer, and they might start to throttle you. They might shadow ban you on Instagram and throttle your posts because you're using the same exact hashtags over and over again, and that feels spammy, according to what I'm hearing. And I've seen this backed up in a number of different places. It feels spammy to the algorithm. So don't use the same hashtags over and over again. Now, that's good news if you're sitting there wondering whether you should use comic or comics. The answer is yes. Use comic today, use comics tomorrow, use webcomics the day after. Are you seeing where this is going?
Right,
the point is not to use the same ones over and over again, because then you get identified as a spammer. So change up your hashtags. What do you have to add to that? Do you have a few thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think that's smart because basically what you're doing here and in answering reader comments below and in general doing very human actions is you're telling the algorithm, I am not a bot. I am not repeating the same
Right.
actions. I am not just trying to get likes. You're saying, oh, I'm actually, they're basically by going through the day-to-day simple motions of logging in Instagram, seeing what people have commented under your comic and then chiming in on it. That alone makes you one step further away from a bot, right? Then,
Yes.
to Brad's point with hashtags, not repeating the same copy paste, webcomics, the same
Right.
hashtags every week. You're also telling the algorithm, I am not a bot, I am not a bot, I am not a bot. And you're asking yourself probably now, well, why is this so important? And it's because Instagram is riddled with bots. You can feel it.
Yes.
As
Yeah.
a creator and as a user, you can feel that it's riddled with bots. They always fudge their numbers on how many they are there, but the simple truth is their business model depends upon the existence of bots to sort of inflate their numbers, both for IPOs and stuff like that, but also for the overall quote unquote success of the platform. Like, oh, look at how big we're going, that kind of stuff.
Yes. Yes.
So they could get rid of bots. They know they could. We know they could. They don't do it.
It'd be very easy to do.
Yeah, and some of them, frankly, there's a couple bots that are fun, but for every one that's fun, there are literally 2 million that are like, this is annoying. What government or pseudo-government or corporation or person is behind this bot? What's happening? Anyway, what I'm getting at there is anything that you can do, to Brad's point, to differentiate yourself as a human being, the algorithm rewards. And so think about that from an individual posting standpoint of like, how can I make this different from yesterday's? And now, having said that, figure out strategies that can make it easy for you to not have to like reinvent the wheel every day. So whatever that means for you as far as hashtags, so that you're not having to sit there at your computer or on your phone going, all right, let's see, what else can I hashtag characters, hashtag humor. No, use humor yesterday, hashtag funny. Like maybe start coming up with a list or something and have it somewhere on your phone. And then that's a great way to do it.
And there's a couple other things that you can do as well. And this has to do with strategy. First of all, and just broadly, anytime you can put a topical hashtag, and I don't mean topical like current events. I mean, your comic is about birds, so you put hashtag birds and whatever specific type of bird it is, et cetera. When you can hashtag, and again, this is strictly on Instagram because this level of hashtagging gets frowned on in a lot of other social media. But you got to have, I think, just a few hashtags that go right to the topic of what this piece of content is dealing with. And then what I try to do is I try to get a few hashtags that go across the spectrum. In other words, I'll want 2 or 3 hashtags that populate in the millions because I know I'm going to appear in front of an awful lot of people for about a second. But that's okay because it's a large group of people. Then I want a few hashtags that are on the other side of that spectrum that are don't get populated a whole lot. Maybe only 100 or a couple thousand people have used that hashtag. And in that side of the spectrum, it's a very small number of people that are going to see it, but I'm going to be right at the top of that list for a long time. So you want to sprinkle your hashtags in such a way that some of them are very popular hashtags and some of them are very specific and not so popular hashtags. And that way you kind of spread it out a little bit. So that's kind of my thrust right now on hashtags is those 3 areas.
I want to super co-sign that, Brad, because here's what that does. You've got a couple that go big, a couple that go broad, and then a couple that go super narrow.
Right.
And then a couple that are even more narrow than that in the sense of like super specific. If your comic today is about pickles, you've got one hashtag pickles, hashtag food in a jar, hashtag, you know what I mean? Like what I'm getting at there is like it's hyper specific and really
kosher dill, seedless,
you're getting in the hundreds, but for the possibility that 1 or 2 people might stumble upon it with that specific hashtag, great. And then I don't think Brad mentioned this, so I will mention it. Make sure you always have 1 or 2 that are specific to you. So hashtag Evil Inc., hashtag Brad Guigar, hashtag Geiger. So sprinkle in 2 or 3 that are specific to you. A few that are in the millions, to Brad's point, a few that are in the 100,000s, a few that are in the thousands, and a few that are specific. I think that's probably the smart way to go, Brad. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. Don't forget branded tags, stuff that is specific to you. That's a great point.
Well, all right, let's move on. Let's move on to our next questioner. You almost got me.
You almost did it, didn't you?
I almost did it. Oh, question asker. I'm just going to say it. All right, let's go on to our next question. But you know what, Brad? I'm just going to cede defeat at this point. You won. You have won, my friend. In the Cold War of phrases.
Come to the dark side. We have Nabisco products.
It's just Brad. Just imagine Brad in the moon planting a flag that says question asker. And that's
right.
Brad won. He won the space race. He did it. All right, so this question, Brad, comes in from Courtney Hahn, who I don't think we've heard from before. So hello, Courtney, and welcome. This says, hi, Brad and Dave. I feel like I've been a medium fish in a small pond, and it's led to a lot of praise and scholarships. Because of this and my ego, I have people say that they don't worry about me, which is nice. But when I have issues, it's difficult to ask for help because I feel like I'm supposed to be okay no matter what. Do you ever have any trouble asking for help in writing or drawing? How would you suggest I go about getting over this hang up about feeling like I'm not supposed to ask for help? And then she says, there's so much more to it, but I think I've gotten across the cliff notes. If you want me to elaborate, let me know. No, I think we've gotten it, Courtney. This is great.
Yeah.
All right, so here we go, Brad. How, when you are seen, perceived as a success in your life or in your friend group or in your professional sphere, as Brad Geiger, he's got it together. How, Brad, do you get over the fear, the anxiety, the hesitation going, well, actually, I need a little bit of help in this moment and I need to ask for help? How do you, Brad, go about, or broadly speaking, how would you suggest someone go about making that move?
That's such a great question. And it's something that I've had personal experience with because I've written 3 books on that are tutorials on cartooning. I wrote the Everything Cartooning book. I co-wrote How to Make Webcomics, and I wrote the Webcomics Handbook. And I do webcomics.com, and I've done a number of podcasts on comics, talking about comics in all aspects: publishing, drawing, writing, social media. When you have that kind of a background and you need to ask for help, what happened with me, this happened in 2012 when the ad revenue market was really declining on me, and I saw that there was an artist, a cartoonist by the name of John Wigger, that was doing Not Safe for Work comics, and I had no idea how to get my head around that. I wanted to consider it, but I didn't know even where to start. And I've seen John at comic conventions year after year. He had given me his business card. We had talked in a friendly way online. He had offered to help me learn Clip Studio Paint back in the day. And so I had his business card, and I finally called him up and I said, John, I need to ask you a few questions. I really want to know more about this topic. And the first thing that came out of his mouth is, you need to ask me questions, the guy that wrote the book on this stuff, which is exactly the fear that I had. It's like, oh, no, don't say that. But what happened in that moment is that it's a moment of humility.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And there are worse things than experiencing humility, especially when you've got as big of a mouth as I do. Experiencing some humility in your life is not a bad thing. It's actually a You didn't have to agree that strongly.
I wasn't agreeing from a, let's make fun of Brad standpoint. I was agreeing from, some of my best learning moments in my life have been when I was truly humbled from either an external or an internal force.
Yeah, no, well, thank you. I agree. And not only that, you have to remember when you're coming to somebody and asking them in a genuine, sincere way, I need your help. You're giving that person, take yourself out of you. Don't go egocentric for a second. Don't think about it in terms of you. Think about it in terms of the big picture. Think about it from the other person's standpoint. You're giving that other person a huge compliment. Right? So don't think about you. Think about them. You're saying, I need information or experience or advice that you might have. Would you share it with me? That's a huge compliment you're paying that person. And you will find 9 chances out of 10 that that person is more than thrilled to share what they know, because let's face it, anybody who's just gotten a compliment is in a very good mood. Right?
Yeah.
So you take yourself out of your head just for a second and look at the big picture and realize that number one, it's okay and it's good for you to experience some humility. And number two, you're giving this other person a huge compliment by coming to them and in a sincere, polite way. And politeness goes hand in hand with it. There is a way to ask for advice, but you're giving that person a huge compliment, and chances are they will take it as such. Is that what you found, Dave?
Yeah, well, I think you hit on the perfect word right out of the gate. And by the way, I liked your whole answer. But humility is an interesting teacher in life. And as we get further and further along with age, we start to develop a sort of egotistical shell. It's like, I know what I'm doing, or I should know what I'm doing. And by God, I don't need to change, and I don't need to be curious, and I don't need to be asking for help. And listen, I say that as someone who themselves got, and at times still gets too egotistical about, like, I'm smart, I know what I'm doing, I don't have to ask for help, I'm doing it right. And then there comes the fall, right? Like that's when I get most humbled, is because I didn't ask for help. I didn't look around and see what other people were doing. I was like, I know what I'm doing, blah, 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 and right over the cliff I go, right? That kind of thing. So I want to give you, and this is just sort of a funny moment in humility, is that the first couple times, my wife works in TV. She's a TV writer, for those that don't remember. And the first couple times she took me to a Hollywood event, boy, did I shine my shoes, Brad. And I went and got a haircut and maybe bought a new tie, and oh boy. Yeah. And here's what I realized in a humility moment. When you're standing in a room with some of the biggest stars and starlets in the world, nobody gives two shits about Dave Kellett over with his shiny shoes, right? Nobody cares. Nobody cares. So like all of that was my ego, like, whoa, I got to look good for this event. No one cares. Literally no one cares. Like photographers pushing me out of the way so they can get a photo of somebody else, right?
Exactly.
I'm a human plant that they're trying to get around to take a photo of. And what I'm getting at, though, is that in those moments, I probably have swung too far away the other direction now for Hollywood events where my wife's like, could you comb your hair? I mean, at least make an attempt. But what I'm getting at there is that
it's called a girdle. I want to talk to you about this.
It's Spanx for men, David. Get in them. So it's called a shower. Try taking one.
No, we got this new thing out. It's called soap and water.
What I'm getting at, though, is that it was a lovely, humbling moment where I realized that, because it has a broader implications for how you view yourself in the world, is that when we walk into a party, we think that all eyes are on us. When we're going through our career, we think that all eyes are on us. When we make some big move in our life, we think that all eyes are on us. Whereas 80% of the time, what other people are doing is they're worried about themselves. And that's the truth of human existence, right? They're not worried about you. Don't worry about how your hair looks. They're not worried about you. Don't worry about the career decisions you're making or faults you might have. What I'm getting at here is, it is okay to be humble, because the truth is everyone is worried about how they are being perceived, how they are being judged, how they're going through the world, right? And so the quote that I always like from C.S. Lewis, who, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, he had that quote that he said, humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. And I always thought, that's a great quote. You don't think that, like, so in Courtney, in this case, when you're going to ask for help, you're not thinking of yourself less of like, oh, Courtney's failed. You're just worried less about the ego that's keeping you from asking for help, because it is a very human, a very simple, a very basic thing to say, hi, I'm a human going through this world and I'm having trouble with XYZ. Could you help me with XYZ? And humans being social animals, the other ones will say, oh my gosh, Courtney, yes, I would love to help you with XYZ. Thanks for asking. I'm actually complimented, to Brad's point, by you asking me for help because you think highly of me. So it is a good step for all of us, because and again, Brad and I make this mistake every week, is that we get too egotistical and we don't ask for help. It is a common thing that we all have to come back through our entire life, that we have to say, no, I'm still learning. I'm still curious. I don't know everything. I'm not a repository for all of Wikipedia. I need to ask for help, and that's okay.
Yeah. And by the way, when your brain wakes you up at 3:00 in the morning, and I think this is universal, wakes you up and says, oh, hey, Brad, remember that really horrible thing that was really embarrassing in high school when you were a sophomore? Remember that thing that you did in the lunchroom?
I sure do,
remember
Brian.
that? Remember, nobody else remembers that thing. You're the only, because you're the one it happened to. Everybody else was living their lives, seeing things through their spectrum. And they if they remember it, they barely remember it and don't remember it with half of the intensity that you do. Go back to sleep.
I don't know, Brain. I feel like everybody at the Bad X High School saw it happen.
They didn't. Listen, nobody was even noticing, and you were wearing dark pants, and nobody could see. Nobody could see anything.
Wait a minute, Brain. What memory are we talking about? Now I'm a little concerned. Brain.
Well, listen, you had a lot to drink that day, and it's okay because sometimes that happens. And you laughed really hard.
Sometimes when you giggle real hard, Brain. Sometimes, Brain, it's okay when you sneeze with that much force. Your bladder does what it can. But you know what, Brain?
But thank God for dark jeans.
I don't know, Brain. I still want to worry about it 30 years later.
No, go back to sleep. I'm telling you.
Okay, Brain, let's instead worry about the taxes I have to file next week.
Now that you got to worry about.
Anyway, Brain, good catching up with you. I've been Brad Geiger. Back to sleep with me.
Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute and stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, Brad and I are going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
Yeah, because, when you do, you'll get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And an exclusive Patreon post that go even deeper on the ComicLab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, no worries.
You can still support the show by rating us wherever you get podcasts.
Leave us a 5-star review and a few kind words.
And that, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
And now, let's talk comics. All right, Dave, we've got a question from a $5 Patreon backer, and this is a real puzzler. I like this one a lot. This is going to make you think. You ready for this?
Yep, let's do it.
All right, it says, when starting writing for the very first time, what comes first, character, setting, or story? And that comes from our Patreon backer, George Mackay. George says, listen, I'm writing for the very first time, and I don't know whether I should start with the character, or the characters, the setting, or the story, the plot itself. And what advice do you have for George?
Wow, that is a $10,000 question in writing, because I think the answer goes like this: whatever is the sparking moment for that story is whatever it is. And I know that doesn't sound helpful, but here's the bottom line. I have heard authors and cartoonists and comic book creators and novelists all say, oh, this story got started from a single scene in my mind, or this story got started because of the final moment, and I knew the last line of the book, and I had to figure out what the first line and every other line for it was. Yeah. Or sometimes they say, in fact, I looked this author up because I remembered this quote from an interview years ago. Walter Mosley, who wrote the Easy Rawlins novels, the detective novels, I think they're set in the 30s or 40s in Los Angeles. Anyway, of which I've only read one, so I'm not trying to pretend like I've read a ton of them. Anyway, that was a lot of backstory. I remember listening to an interview with Walter Mosley one time where he said that he created an entire novel because he saw a character with a scar over their eye. And he said, how did that character get that scar? And that's how an entire Easy Rawlins novel came forth from his mind, which is that he saw one character with a scar and just asked a simple question: how did that character get that scar? Generated a whole 350, 400-page book. Brad, I'm sure you have stories from creators that you love as well, where they're like, I knew the final scene had to degrade the whole story that came up to that scene. Or I knew I had one character on a train. How did they get on that train? That kind of thing. What's your thinking, Brad? How does it normally start for you? Or first of all, let's start from a broad thing. Is there a correct way to do it? A character first, a story engine first, or a moment first?
That's exactly what I want to talk about is that, okay, so when we talk about setting up a Patreon, we've got some tips, and we've got, okay, first you should do this, then you should do that. You got to make sure you do this other thing. And before you hit the start button, you got to make sure this is covered and stuff like that. And it's the same thing for setting up a website. And we just talked about a whole bunch of stuff that will help you on social media. When it comes to issues of creativity, all bets are off because there's as many approaches to creativity as there are creators doing the creating.
Right.
And there, you can never come up. I can never tell you how to write a story. Maybe it's going to be character. Maybe it's going to be story. Maybe it's going to be an emotion that you're trying to get across, and you're going to write your way through that emotion. It could be 110 different things. I don't ever let anyone tell you there's a right way or a wrong way to create. There's only your way. That's
right.
And that's
right.
really what you need to focus on, is not whether you're doing it by the book or whether you're doing it in the most efficient way possible. You don't need, I don't want you to spend one more second asking yourself if you're doing it the right way. What I want you instead to start focusing on is on how am I going to do it? What's the right way for me? So stop thinking about what's the right way. Start thinking about what's my way.
Yeah.
Right. And once you work on my way, then you can start to refine your way, and you can start to improve your way. And your entire progression as a creator is going to be taking that initial step of what's my way of doing it and making it better.
The interesting thing here is that one of the most important things, the most important steps in all of this is just giving yourself permission to start.
Yes.
Because whether it's a single character that intrigues you, a moment in time in the story that intrigues you, a story engine that intrigues you, whatever gets you started, gets the motor revving, that's fine. That's okay. To Brad's point, there's no correct way to start. But giving yourself permission to start with that impetus, with that energy is what's the key thing. Because what is ultimately important is that you are eventually going to have to round out this really interesting character, this really interesting moment, this really interesting plot with all of the other elements, so that it's not just really interesting characters in a shitty story, or what an amazing story populated by shitty characters. Like, you're going to have to eventually balance them out. So whatever gets you started is fine. That's okay. That's what we all live for, is that instant moment of inspiration, or that slow boil inspiration that gets you started. That's great that happens. And to Brad's point, whatever way it happens to you is fine. Frankly, It's how you get it all collectively over the finish line. That's the trickier part. And so whether it's characters, moments, story, whatever gets your engine running, use it. That is the moments we all wait for. Use it and run. What do you think, Brad?
Yep. That's I can't say it any better than that. That's the best way to put it. Get working and don't worry about whether you're doing it right. You're doing it right.
Yeah, because ultimately, it is but the first step. It's like running a sprint, and whatever gets you over the finish line, that's all the work that got you there. But that first step is just that's the starting gun, right? So whatever gets you going as a starting gun, use it. That's the hardest part, frankly, is finding the inspiration that gets you excited enough that you want to find a story. And then the equally hard part, I'm realizing, is also telling the story. So never mind about that being the hardest part. I'm going to back away from that.
Well, there's an old story in golf that if you really want to screw a golfer up, you ask them as they're about to tee off, do you inhale or exhale just as you're about to hit the ball?
That's amazing. What an amazing joke.
And what that does is it focuses the person, instead of all the things that you've got to do to have a nice, smooth golf swing, which I gave up trying to do 10, 15 years ago, instead of taking them out of that smooth moment in which it's golf is, in a lot of sports, is a very zen thing. Once you get the muscle memory down, it's this dance that you're doing more than a physical activity. It's a smooth kind of progression. If you start paying attention to little intricacies, like whether you inhale and exhale, you're gonna be out in the weeds in no time. And writing is no different. If you are hyper aware of, oh, I don't have enough of this and I don't have enough of that, and I'm just starting out, you're going to be in the weeds
Yep.
and trying to hack your way out. Just get started. Go be a little bit zen about it. Start writing. The real work of writing isn't this point anyway. It's after you've gotten your first draft done, and you need to go back and rewrite it, and you need to edit it, and you need to perfect it and find out where the holes are and all that kind of stuff. That's where the real work of writing happens. But right now, don't ask yourself whether you're inhaling or exhale. Just swing that club.
And let me reword our answer, because I think it would be helpful to answer the question behind the question. Because really the question behind this question, Brad, and it's universal for Brad, myself, and everybody else, the question behind the question is fear, right? It's fear of, am I doing this wrong? If I start my story this way, or if I start writing the process, my writing process this way, or if I do my characters this way, or my storyline this way, am I doing it wrong? And to Brad and my point, just starting, that leap of faith of starting is one of the hardest things to do, because you are overcoming your own fear that you are not doing it wrong. That there is, in fact, no one path to the mountain, that merely starting is a part of a 10,000 step process. And don't let yourself freeze up by, J.K. Rowling says she started with characters, so I guess I have to start with characters. And no, George Lucas started with story and then populated characters, so who cares? Or what I'm getting at. And frankly, maybe it would be helpful for people to hear how we started ours. And so let me take you for a 2-second tour of how I started Drive about 9 or 10 years ago.
Okay.
Which was, I had 3 competing ideas that I wanted to craft a story around. I wanted to have it where humanity got an interstellar drive engine, right? That they could go from one star to another faster than light. But I wanted it to be owned and controlled by one family, kind of like a House of Sod, but for an interstellar drive, right? So I wanted that possibility. I also wanted the drive to have been stolen from aliens who think of their creations in an almost semi-religious, animistic way, right? So that the creation of an engine or the creation of a device is imbues it with a certain spirituality. So it was really pissing them off that humans stole this drive. So that was the second thing. And then the third thing is, I wanted there to be one species of alien that could see gravity and therefore could steer a ship in a faster than light speed. And so that's all I had. I didn't have any of the characters that people, for the most part, know and love about Drive. I didn't have any of the world building about how the Empire was structured or how the other alien structures. I just had those 3 elements, and that's how I started Drive. And so for Brad, for you, what was the organizing principle for Evil Inc.? Like, what was the thing that started it for you?
I don't know which category this falls into. Mine started with a concept. And the concept was a corporation run by supervillains. That was it. It was like, I thought if the concept of a corporation run by supervillains to me had enough legs to it that I figured I could write to that in a number of different permutations for a long time. There'd be a lot of good stories that would come about. Yeah. So it was the concept first, and then I populated it with characters, and then the stories came after that. So I kind of went at it at a roundabout way. It was concept first.
And as an artist, I've always been jealous of that concept because it so immediately sells itself. Like, you immediately know what that world is. No matter who you are, what kind of writer you are, like, I could write to that. I could write to supervillains running a corporation. That's amazing. That's an amazing idea. And then secondly, Brad and I came at it totally different. Brad came at it from one-line elevator pitch concept. I came at it with, frankly, story engine chunks, right? And he and I could both think of characters that, or the authors that started from character and then built the world out from there. So what we're getting at there is that regardless of how you do it, the bigger question here is just getting over the fear to start, because starting is half the battle.
Right. And not only that, but I got to throw this in because it's just occurred to me. And that was kind of not true, saying I started with that concept. What I did was I started with a comic strip that I did for 4.5 years.
Yeah, that's true.
And during that comic strip, during Greystone Inn, the concept of a corporation run by supervillains came up in a 1-week storyline. So it was part of that other thing that I had done. But I don't know that I could have gotten to a corporation run by supervillains without starting with Greystone Inn. It just didn't. I wasn't just sitting there saying, "Oh, I know I'm going to do a new comic. It's going to be this thing." I was doing a comic strip that was completely unrelated, and this concept came up, and then I realized, "Oh, geez, this is a whole comic strip of itself, and it's got a lot better entry points for new readers than Greystone did." And I was feeling a need to change anyway, so that became the new strip. But really, in the same way that we said not too long ago about how the best way to beat writer's block, we did that in ProTips, I think a little while ago. Best way to beat writer's block is to just start writing, and you got to go through sometimes a lot of crap before you get to the good stuff. And what keeps us blocked up as writers is we think we got to start writing good stuff, when a lot of times we got to start writing crap. Greystone Inn wasn't necessarily crap, but it was the process that I needed to go through for 4.5 years before I was ready as a creator to do Evil Inc.
Right, because what you were doing in the meantime is you were refining your editorial eye and your skill set so that the both of them, after 4.5 years, could go, hey, you know what? You know, that kind of a thing.
Yes.
Where you now know what to edit out. You now know what to focus in on. You now know how to write it better and execute it better. And frankly, you now, after those 4.5 years, could spot the better idea that was embedded within an idea. So, I think Brad's point is super excellent there. So bravo to Brad. But anyway, the idea is, and we wish you both well on it, is really just starting, getting over the fear and just starting with whatever spark works for you. And I think that puts a button on it. Don't you think, Brad?
Absolutely. And that brings us to another $5 question from a Patreon backer, Francis Foster. You want to hear what Francis is up to?
I do want to hear I don't think we've ever heard from Francis before. So welcome, Francis.
So Francis writes, this is a follow-up to the "would you still do a comic even if nobody read it" discussion. And Francis says, other than monetary rewards and analytics, in other words, likes and reblogs, etc., what gratifications do you get from your readers? Asking as someone who isn't looking to monetize their work, nor can be bothered to keep track of stats. In other words, he says, take money and analytics out of the equation. What's the gratification you get from comics?
Oh, boy. This is a great question. We're removing money from the equation. We're removing stats and likes and reblogs. I like this. Right. What gratifications do I get? So he would like us to focus specifically on from readers. Okay, before I will answer that, but before I do that, I will say there is that phrase that the French came up with in the 19th century called art for art's sake. Yeah. And I actually can't pronounce it in French. As we all know from my pronunciation of croissant, I can't do it. It's like l'art pour... Dylan McConus will email me. It's something like l'art pour l'art or whatever. Anyway, it's art for art's sake is the phrase in English. And the idea there is that there is a joy and a satisfaction and a worthiness just in creating art, just because you wanted to create art, right? Yeah. And so I think I feel that, Brad feels that, I'm sure Francis feels that, I'm sure everybody feels that, where sometimes you just create art just for the joy and the beauty of creating art in and of itself, right? Mm-hmm. So there's that. I get that even if there's no monetary remuneration. That's a word I hate, remuneration.
Wow, and that isn't even a French word.
Language, it's my friend. Anyway,
now I understand why you keep ending up with a ham sandwich when you're asking for an almond croissant.
My friend, you have it wrong. I'm wanting the ham sandwich. I keep getting the damn almonds. That's.
By the way, I don't want to take you off track, but I do have to say this because it came up in our Discord server.
Okay.
Canthera says you're pronouncing the J as if it were Spanish, not French. So ham-on sounds like amand. The J is supposed to be pronounced like that in English, but softer without the D sound at the beginning, and that's why you keep getting the wrong sandwich. She explained it all. She explained it all in Discord, man.
I got to go check that out. So as an English and Spanish speaker, I'm too tilted towards. I see what my mistake was. Thank you. Yes. Doff of the cap. My next trip to Paris, sometime in 2030, will be helped. I'll finally get that ham and cheese croissant that I've been wanting.
But to bring you back on track, you were talking about art for art's sake.
Yes. So having established that, I think both Brad and I and yourself probably create art for art's sake, which is, I think, true. I think so many of humans do that for that sake.
Yes.
Now, from readers, the gratification I get is 10,000 fold. And thankfully, because I write humor, I very often get, I don't want to say very often. In fact, it's not even often at all. Once a quarter, maybe a couple of times a year, I will get an email that says, I just went through a divorce and I had one of the darkest years of my life. And one of the few things that lifted me out of my shitty place was reading your comics. Or I'll get an email, and again, these are not like super frequent. They're once or twice a year. I'll get an email that says something like, my son was really hitting a depression that had him borderline suicidal, and your comics were lifting him out of that. Or I'll get something that's saying like, hey, on a forum, your comics helped me meet my girlfriend or my boyfriend, and we're hanging out because we love you. And those moments, and all of them, if you notice, they're all about human connection. They're all about humans to humans making one another's lives better. And isn't that, not to sound like my grandmother, but isn't that what we're all meant to be doing here on this earth? You know, like, forget money, we're all going to be cold and in the grave at some point. So God forbid you make the world a little bit better with your art and with your presence and what you put out into the world.
So much of what you just said, especially the human connection part, it resonated with me because ever since I started Evil Ink After Dark, I'll get an email that says, Brad, I was feeling kind of bound up lately and a little bit antsy.
Jeez Louise.
I was feeling a little antsy and...
Stop it! Stop it! Stop it! Stop it! No,
that's a human connection.
I was making a beautiful point about humans helping humans and making their lives better.
So was I,
Brad. Damn it! Oh boy! Well, we had a nice little trip to the other side of town there.
Like yours is so much better. Suicide! Come on!
I know this has happened for Brad too, because he has shared those emails with me in the past that Evil Ink has made someone laugh in a dark moment, or or I've seen it at Comic-Cons where people come up to you and they say, for whatever reason I fell out of comics, but Evil Ink's brought me back to comics and now I'm reading them a lot and my life is better because of you, Brad Guigar.
Oh yeah,
I've seen that happen.
I've seen a lot of people that come up and they say, like, I was stationed in Iraq or I was stationed over in the Middle East.
Yeah.
And my only real contact was through things like Webcomics and things that I could easily get online. And, that really kept me entertained. It kept my mind off of things. I had 30 seconds where I wasn't thinking about where I was and what I was doing. Stuff like that is nice. It's nice to know that you can be part of somebody's mental health moment where they can take just a second and say, oh, okay. And especially like you hit the nail right on the head when you're working in humor. Part of the worst thing about working in humor isn't when a joke misses. It's the fact that as cartoonists, we never get to hear our laughs that we get.
Right.
The closest we get is when somebody takes a moment to write us an email or ping us on social media saying, oh, I love that. That was great. I'm seeing that so much that's been really what's driving me on Instagram. I'm getting that more on Instagram than I'm getting any place else. Just people taking a moment to saying, that one got me. That one really was good.
Right.
We never get to hear our laughter otherwise. And so that's really super important. And when you're working in humor, it is so difficult to really find that perfect balance of what's going to connect with somebody and what's going to make it really funny and not pushing it so far that it becomes hard for people to understand, finding that perfect balance that makes it funny. When you realize that you've connected that, when you've accomplished that successfully, there's no greater feeling in the world. And for me, I end up chasing that dragon year after year after year. It's like I know not every one of them is hitting with every one of my readers, but knowing that I'm connecting with some degree of regularity. That's a fantastic feeling. And that's what it is for me is that connection.
I'm so glad you used the phrase chasing the dragon because I actually, one of the things that Comic-Cons do for me, and I know that they don't do this for every other cartoonist, and I know that sometimes the cost and hassle of going to a Comic-Cons, outweigh these gratifications for other cartoonists. But for me, every year, one of the reasons why I so look forward to Comic-Con is that it's a genuine chasing of the dragon of the human to human, someone looking me in the eye and going, here's some fan art I drew of your character. Here's some brownies I made you because I love your comics so much. Or here's a handshake that is super sincere and you can tell that I'm kind of nervous meeting you because that's how much your comics mean to me. And Brad, I'm not kidding when I say I come out of Comic-Con on a high that I carried for at least a month. And frankly, logically, I carry it all year, but emotionally, I carry it for like a month where I go, oh, geez, I feel great about my comics. And that kind of gratification has nothing to do with money, has nothing to do with likes. It's all about a human-to-human moment. And I can't tell you how much that means to me coming out of Comic-Con at San Diego booth 1228.
There you go. You did it.
I did it. I did
sneak.
it. Oh,
you sneak.
Oh, my gosh. I think I'm this week's winner of getting it in one last time. The old San Diego Comic-Con booth 1228. That's right. Dave Kellett will be all 5 days at San Diego Comic-Con on the 1200 row. That's right. That's the Webcomics area of San Diego Comic-Con. Look for Dave Kellett at booth 1228.
Oh my God. Here I was hooked right in. I'm like, oh man, that is really nice. That's a good point about comic conventions. 1228. Oh, shucks. You
God.
led me down the primrose path.
Oh, that's all right. You know what's funny? 99% of that was sincere. And then I'm like, hey, wait a minute. I can work the booth in one last time.
Well, listen, I think we've got time for another question. What do you think?
Sure. Let me ask you this one, Brad. This one comes in from Kayla Swain, and she writes, Brad and Dave, do you guys add page numbers to your books? Why or why not? And if you do it, is there an easy way to do it? And so, Brad, you are the resident expert at Adobe InDesign and in general at layout after a decade of working in newspapers. So first, you go ahead and answer, Kayla, if you do or do not add page numbers, and then how you do it.
I did for a while, and if I got to go back and look and see if I did it on my last book. So here's what happened. I was looking, trying to research for some stuff for my book. For the Webcomics Handbook about publishing and so forth. And so I was getting a lot of information on what kind of things you have to have on a book. Like you have to have the barcode on the back. That if you're going into distribution, that's a must. And things like the special categories that are often found in the upper left-hand corner of the back cover, all of those things, the indicia page, the copyright notation, all that stuff I was looking up. And one of the things that I think it was a library association was recommending was page numbers. In fact, they were quite adamant. It was like one of those, this is not an official book unless it's got page numbers sort of thing. And so I put page numbers on all of the Evil Ink graphic novels 1 through 9 when I was putting them out. And then I was kind of looking at it and it was taking up a lot of space that I didn't want to give up. And I just don't know from a practical standpoint, who's ever going to use a page number in a graphic novel. Okay. In other words, in a novel, I could see somebody saying, as you can clearly see on page 94, he admits to treason. Okay, that's important. You got to have an index of what page that treason was. But in a graphic novel, who's using that? So I don't think I did it in the last couple of books. However, there is an easy way to do it in InDesign. Having said that, I'll be darned if I can say it off the top of my head, but I will put it in the show notes for our Patreon backers. It's very easy to do in InDesign. It involves the number sign, what we call a hashtag now. It involves the number sign and giving it a special designation in your text tool. But I'll put that in the show notes along with some easy tutorial stuff so you can follow it along there. But it is easy to do if you want to do it. What do you think, Dave? Do you do page numbers?
I do, especially in Drive, largely for the reasons that you mentioned, which is I like to give people a way sign where they can say, like, well, who said that? I don't remember that ever being said in the story. And someone else can go, oh, page 54 of Act 2, that kind of thing. So
Have you ever seen that happen?
I have, yes, actually,
Have you?
yes.
Good.
I was going to be hesitant about it, but yes, I have seen that happen, especially on the Patreon comments for Drive. Like, there's a really lively fan theories and discussions that go on.
Yeah, I've seen your Patreon discussion, and it's robust. So I I completely believe that that's going on. Absolutely,
it is, and frankly, I don't know how I lucked out with that. But anyway, that doesn't matter. So the important thing to mention is that they do it one of two ways. They either reference the URL, or they'll say like, "Oh, I happen to have Act 2 of the book right next to me, and it's on page 38." And I flipped, and it is on. They did say that on page 38, that kind of thing. And so for me, I also put an index in the back of the Drive books for certain kinds of things, like, hey, here's all the found objects, here's all the maps, and they're on these pages. And so an index is made virtually useless unless there are page numbers.
Yeah.
And so for that, I do it. But here's the thing. For the Sheldon books, I put it on there so that if someone ever wanted to reference, they could. But is it necessary? 99.999% of the time, no. Like, no one needs it.
Yeah.
I will disagree with Brad that I don't think it takes up a lot of mental space to put it there. Like, I don't know that no one's going like, oh, this page would be beautiful, except for this page number at the bottom. Damn this thing. That kind of like I'm looking at Evil Ink Volume 6. While you were talking, I stood up and grabbed it off my bookshelf, which is right next to me. And so Brad has things at the bottom that actually I think he's moved away from. And so I would agree with this. He used to have Brad Guigar, the page number, and then on the far side, Evil Ink Annual Report, Volume 9. And my thought to pass Brad, and I think even Brad would say this to pass Brad, is no one needs to see Brad Guigar at the bottom, and no one needs to see Evil Ink Annual Report, Volume 9 at the bottom. I think both of us would agree that like they know what they're holding at that point, and they know they don't need to know who wrote it. But so if you're the kind of person that, like, I don't even think novels need that. A lot of novels have that too. And that's probably where Brad and I got that.
That's exactly where I got that. And that was the same research that I had done that said it had to have a page number. It said on the left-hand side, you can put the author. On the right-hand side, you can put the title. And so I'm like, oh, that makes sense. And I just, and what happened was after I'd done it for a few years, I looked at it and had the exact same reaction you had, where it was like, why the hell am I doing this? That looks horrible. But one simple little page number down there would not hurt things aesthetically a bit. It really wouldn't.
Now, having said that, though, I'm actually the thing that I'm wondering if like there's certain novels, like say Watchmen, where it so perfectly fills the page where if you put a page number at the bottom of Watchmen, I actually do think Brad's right that would be like, why is that there? It's a lot of weird negative space at the bottom, that kind of thing.
Right.
And frankly, does anyone need to reference in Watchmen where Dr. Manhattan went to Mars? I mean, I guess so. I guess, yes. The truth is somebody probably does. But, and it's akin to Drive when I say that. But 99.99% of the readership experience doesn't need that. Right, Brad?
Mm-hmm. Well, and you'll see in comic books, you'll see people sometimes hide them inside of inside corner of a side panel.
Yeah, that's
like
true.
If you'll see it on the bottom panel on the outside corner. You'll see it just hiding right inside the panel there. But then again, if you're hiding it, is it useful?
Right.
How useful is something that you're hiding?
Yeah, no, I guess you're right. I'm looking through different books now with page numbers, and this is actually more of an existential moment than I thought it was. Yeah. Like, I'm actually wondering, putting page numbers onto a book, is that an egotistical move from an author who thinks that someday it might be important for someone to reference this page?
Exactly.
Now I'm wondering if I'm wrong, Brad.
No, clearly you're not, because you're seeing people use it, and if people are using it, then it's a good thing. I mean, you can't question that. If it's being used, it's good. And like you said, it's not taking up any room. It's not aesthetically hurting you. My experience has been different. I've never known anybody to do that. And for my stuff, they can say, well, in this chapter or in this volume, or again on this URL that the XYZ happened. But if it's being used, if it's something that your audience finds useful, then go with it. But on the other hand, if you're looking at your page layout and you're like, where the heck am I going to shoehorn in a page number? I don't know. I think you got bigger things to worry about.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Having just flipped through The Watchmen, I actually have a totally unrelated question for you, Brad.
Okay.
The character Ozymandias. Do you remember Ozymandias from The Watchmen?
Yes.
This completely popped in just from flipping through Watchmen right now. Adrian Veidt, the smart one on the Watchmen team, right? Did he secretly have superpowers? You know how they always said, like, Dr. Manhattan was the only one that actually had superpowers, but did Ozymandias kind of secretly have superpowers?
Unless you count like as being super smart or something like that, I don't know that he had superpowers per se. I can't. I'm going back through the story and I'm trying to remember, a point at which he exhibited superhuman abilities, and I don't recall one off the top of my head.
Well, I vaguely remember him beating the shit out of the other two when they came to the Antarctic or whatever. And he was also super smart. And I'm wondering, like, was that kind of the hidden through line, is that Adrian was the only one aside from Dr. Manhattan that also had power? This is apropos of nothing. Like, who cares, by the way? Why are we even talking about this? Why did I bring this up? What a dumb end of show discussion. Why am
Apropos? Apropos?
How do you say it? Go ahead. School me on it.
You mean apropos?
Apropos! Oh, for God's sake. What did I say? Apropos?
You said apropos.
Apropos. It's apropos.
It's like
Oh, my God, Brad. Let me tell you something. That ain't apropos of nothing. Holy shit, Brad.
Apropos of nothing at all over there. It left me nonplussed.
Brad, hold on. I got a couple questions for you about the Watchmen. It's apropos of nothing. So you got a couple minutes here?
Yeah, I got a couple minutes for you.
I got an unapropos question for you. It's unapropos of nothing. Wow, apropos. What a proud moment for me.
Apropos. Well,
good job, high school and college, getting me to that moment. Good job.
We're not going to do better than that, so it's up to me to say you've been listening to ComicLab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been the most apropos guy I've ever met. Brad Guigar, the editor of Webcomics.com. You should check that out. It's good stuff. And the cartoonist of Evil Link. Oh, are you ready for this? Get out your pencils. Evil-comic.com. That's apropos of you having fun.
Get out your pencils. And the conveniently nonplussed Dave Kellett, co-director of Stripped and cartoonist of Sheldon at SheldonComics.com and Drive at DriveComic.com. You can see him at San Diego Comic-Con booth number 1228.
Brad Guigar winning 1,000 friendship points.
That's right, baby.
And the Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode was edited by Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
Comic Lab is made possible by your support on patreon.com/comiclab, so we're going to say that twice. Patreon.com/comiclab.
So, Brad, as you were slowly saying 1228, I was making the maddest dash to the little button that gets me to be able to do. It was just like, oh God, he's saying it. He's actually saying it. Quick, get to the button. Quick.
I'm so glad you didn't hit the wrong button. It would have been completely different. It would have been Orson Welles.
Oh, Brad is saying my booth number. He's saying my booth number.
That would have been even better.